Three people, three houses, three stories that none of them have ever been able to fully explain. What you're about to hear was submitted to me by real people, ordinary people, who made the mistake of stepping inside a house that should have stayed empty. I've read thousands of stories over the years. These three kept me up. The first story is about what happens when you ignore every warning sign. The second is about a house that seemed to be watching. And the third? Shh. Third one I still don't have an explanation for. And I've tried. Keep the lights on. Let's get into it. Story 1. The Ones in the Walls. This first story comes from a man named Daniel. He was 34 years old when this happened, living alone after a divorce, and looking for a fresh start somewhere cheap and quiet. He found a house in rural Ohio that had been vacant for 2 years. The price was low enough that he didn't ask why. This is Daniel's story in his own words. Daniel's account. I moved in on a Saturday in November. The house was old, early 1900s, 2 stories, detached garage, the kind of place that looks better in listed photos than in person. But it was mine, and after everything I'd been through, mine was enough. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not bad exactly, just present. Like the house had been breathing recycled air for so long, it had developed its own scent. I told myself it would clear out once I opened the windows. It didn't. The second thing I noticed was the sounds. Every old house settles, I know that. But this house didn't settle at night, it unsettled. The sounds came from inside the walls. Not pipes, not the furnace. Something organic, rhythmic almost, like shallow breathing. I told myself it was animals. Raccoons in the insulation, maybe. I called a pest control company. The guy came out, spent 40 minutes walking the perimeter and the attic, and left looking slightly pale. He told me he didn't find evidence of any animals. No droppings, no nesting, no entry points. He didn't charge me for the visit. He just left. Pause. Week 2. I'd started sleeping with earplugs, which helped until the night I woke up at 2 a.m. and realized the breathing sound wasn't coming from the walls anymore. It was coming from under the bed. I didn't move for 4 minutes. I counted. I lay completely still in the dark, eyes open, and I listened to something beneath me exhale slowly, steadily, like it had been there the whole time and had simply gotten tired of pretending otherwise. I turned on the light, got on my knees, looked under the bed. Nothing. Bare floorboards, dust, nothing. But the smell was stronger there. Right there at floor level, in the space beneath where I slept. That same recycled ancient air. Closer now, personal. I started sleeping on the couch after that, which is how I discovered the basement door. I'd been in the house for 2 weeks, and I had never noticed a door at the far end of the utility room. It was painted the same color as the wall. No handle, just a faint rectangular outline, and, at floor level, a gap of about an inch. The breathing sound was loudest there. Pause. I didn't open it. I want to be clear about that. I never opened it. Instead, I called my landlord and told him I was leaving. He didn't argue. He didn't ask why. He just said okay in a tone that suggested he'd had this conversation before. I was out within 48 hours. I left most of my furniture. A month later, out of some compulsion I still can't explain, I drove past the house. There was a light on in the upstairs window. The house had a new tenant. I almost stopped to warn them. Almost. Instead, I kept driving, and I have never gone back. Bridge into story 2. Daniel told me he sometimes still hears that sound in quiet rooms. That rhythmic, patient exhale. He says it took him almost a year before he could sleep with the lights off again. What disturbs me most about Daniel's story isn't the sound under the bed. It's the pest control man who left without charging him and never came back. Whatever he found, or didn't find, was enough to make a professional walk away for free. The second story is different. quieter at first, but in some ways more disturbing. Story 2. It watched me sleep. This story comes from a woman named Priya. She was a graduate student at the time, 26 years old, renting a house off campus in a college town in Vermont. The house was older than most of the buildings on the street, a converted single-family home split into a rental. She was the only tenant. Priya is one of the most measured, rational people who has ever submitted a story to me. She prefaced her account with 3 paragraphs explaining her skepticism about the paranormal. I want you to keep that in mind as you listen. Priya's account, I need to start by saying, I don't believe in ghosts. I'm a scientist by training. I study behavioral psychology, and I have a very high threshold for what I accept as real. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand that what I'm about to describe is not something I've accepted lightly. The house on Aldrich Street looked fine. It looked better than fine, actually. High ceilings, original hardwood floors, big windows. The landlord was a pleasant older man who seemed almost eager for me to sign quickly. I remember thinking that was slightly odd, but attributed it to normal landlord behavior. The first 2 weeks were unremarkable. The house was quiet. I worked, I studied, I slept. Nothing unusual. Then I came home on a Tuesday afternoon to find every mirror in the house turned to face the wall. Not removed, not broken, turned. The bathroom mirror was still mounted, but angled downward, facing the floor. The full-length mirror in the bedroom had been rotated 90 degrees to face the wall. A small decorative mirror in the hallway had been physically lifted off its hook and placed face down on the floor. I called the landlord immediately. He arrived within 20 minutes, which, looking back, was itself unusual, as if he was nearby and expecting the call. He looked at the mirrors. He looked at me. He said, and I'm quoting him exactly, "Sometimes the house does this. Just turn them back." I said, "What do you mean the house does this?" He said, "It doesn't like to be watched." And then he left. I am a behavioral psychologist. I am trained to recognize gaslighting, manipulation, and environmental staging. I went through every rational explanation. A person had entered the house, but there was no sign of entry and nothing was taken. I had done it myself during a dissociative episode. I have no history of dissociation, and the mirrors were in rooms I would need tools to rotate. The landlord had done it to unsettle me. Possible, but for what purpose? None of the explanations were satisfying. So I did what I always do when I lack data. I set up an experiment. I installed 2 motion-activated cameras, one in the hallway, one in the bedroom. I positioned them to capture the mirrors, and I waited. Nothing happened for 11 days. I started to feel foolish. On day 12, the bedroom camera triggered at 4:17 a.m. The footage showed the bedroom empty, just as I had left it. The mirror on the wall, the bed, with me asleep in it, and standing in the corner of the room, partially obscured by shadow, completely still. A shape, tall, thin, not moving, just standing there facing the bed. It stood there for 9 minutes. Then it was gone. Not on camera. It simply wasn't there anymore. No movement out, just present, then absent. Pause. I sent the footage to 3 colleagues and asked them to tell me what they saw without any context. All 3 described the same thing. One of them called me afterward and asked if I was okay. When I asked why, she said, "Because whatever that is, it's watching you like it knows you." I moved out the next morning. I've never watched that footage again. I gave a copy to the landlord when I returned my keys. He watched it on my phone, nodded once, and said, "I'm sorry." Nothing else. I don't know what was in that house. I don't know if the mirrors were a warning or something else entirely. What I know is that something stood in my bedroom for 9 minutes while I slept, and it wasn't caught walking in or walking out. And I know my colleague was right. The way it was positioned, the angle of that shape in the corner, it wasn't just in the room. It was watching me specifically. The way you watch something you've been waiting a long time to see. Priya sent me that footage. I've watched it more times than I'm comfortable admitting. Her colleague's description is accurate. Whatever that shape is, it has the posture of familiarity, of patience, like it's been waiting in that corner long before Priya ever moved in. I've shown it to people who study these things. None of them have given me a satisfying answer. The most honest response I received was from a researcher who watched it twice and then handed back my phone and said, "I wouldn't go back in that house." The third story has no footage, no recordings, no witnesses, just one woman alone and something that should not have known her name. If these stories are getting to you, hit subscribe. New horror every week. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Story 3. The House That Called Her Home. I've saved this one for last because, unlike Daniel's story and unlike Priya's, this one has no explanation I can offer you. No rational framework. Nothing I can point to and say, "This is probably what happened." This story comes from a woman named Celeste. She was 41 at the time, a real estate agent. Someone who spent her career walking through empty houses. Someone who, by her own account, had never once been frightened by an empty building in her life. Until this one. Celeste's account want to say up front that I've been inside hundreds of abandoned properties in my career. Estate sales, foreclosures, properties that had been vacant for decades. I've walked through houses where people died, houses that burned, houses that sat empty for so long, nature had started reclaiming the floors. I was never scared. It was just architecture. The house on Vellum Road was a probate listing. The owner had died with no immediate family, and the estate was being liquidated. On paper, it was a straightforward job. Assess, photograph, price. I'd done it 100 times. I pulled up on a Wednesday morning in October. The house was at the end of a private road, set back from the tree line. 2 stories, mid-century build, well-maintained for an abandoned property. Someone had taken care of it, or at least started to. The grass had been cut recently. The windows were clean. I noted that as unusual, but not alarming. Sometimes neighbors maintain vacant properties. Sometimes estate attorneys arrange basic upkeep. I went inside. The house was completely furnished. Again, not unusual for probate. The contents are part of the estate. Furniture, dishes, books on shelves. The previous owner's life, suspended mid-sentence. What was unusual was the dining room table. It was set, not display set, the way a staged house is arranged for photographs. Actually set. 4 placemats, 4 plates, 4 glasses, napkins folded, a centerpiece of dried flowers that looked recent, not decades old. I photographed it and moved on. There was an explanation. There was always an explanation. I was upstairs in the master bedroom when I heard it. My name, coming from downstairs, spoken clearly, conversationally, the way you'd call to someone in the next room. Not a whisper, not a moan. My name, said in an ordinary human voice from the floor below. I stood completely still. My first thought was that someone else had entered the house. An attorney, a neighbor, another agent. I called out, "Hello, someone there?" Silence. Then, after about 20 seconds, my name again. Same tone, same casual familiarity. Like whoever was downstairs had said it, waited for me to process it, and then said it again because I hadn't answered. Pause. I want to be precise about something. This was not my imagination. I am not someone prone to auditory hallucinations. I had slept well. I had not been drinking. I was in full possession of my faculties. A voice in that house said my name twice. I went downstairs. I searched every room. I checked every closet, the basement, the garage. I walked the full perimeter of the exterior. No one was there. No car in the driveway except mine. No footprints in the soft soil around the foundation except my own. I went back to the dining room. The table was still set for 4. Except now, there were 5 place settings. Long pause. I have gone over this moment 10,000 times. I am certain there were 4 settings when I first entered. I photographed them. 4 plates, 4 glasses. I have those photographs on my phone. I have looked at them so many times, the images feel burned into my memory. When I came back down, there were 5. A 5th placemat, a 5th plate, a 5th glass. The napkin folded identically to the others, as if it had always been there. And in the center of the 5th plate, a single dried flower from the centerpiece arrangement, laid flat, facing my chair, the one I would have sat in based on where I had been standing when I first walked into the room. The chair closest to the door, the one that faced the window. The house had set a place for me. Long pause. I left. I got in my car and I drove directly to my office, and I sat in the parking lot for 40 minutes before I could go inside. I filed the listing from my desk. I never went back to that property. The house sold 3 months later. I don't know who bought it. I've thought about trying to find out, about reaching out to warn them about something. But what would I say? What warning would be specific enough to be useful? What I know is this: something in that house knew my name before I arrived. It set a place for me at the table. And when it called me, it didn't sound frightening. It sounded like it was welcoming me home. 3 houses. 3 people who walked in looking for something ordinary. Shelter, solitude, a simple job to finish. 3 people who left with something they couldn't put down. Daniel still hears breathing in quiet rooms. Priya never watched her footage again. And Celeste, the last time she wrote to me, told me she'd stopped taking probate listings entirely. What unsettles me most, looking at these 3 stories together, is not the individual events. It's the pattern underneath them. The sense that these houses weren't reacting to the people who entered them. They were expecting them. If you've ever experienced something you couldn't explain inside a house, a sound, a feeling, something that moved when nothing should have, send it to me. The address is in the description. Every story I tell started as someone sitting alone, wondering if anyone would believe them. I believe you. Stay safe out there. And if you're watching this at 3 a.m. alone in the dark, pause. Maybe check the corners of the room before you go to sleep. If this kept you up, you know what to do. Subscribe, like, and share, and don't forget to turn on the notification button to get notified when I drop another amazing video like these.